My story with this manga doesn't begin with this manga. It starts with another one of the author's works, The Girl from the Other Side, Shul Arun, which, fun fact not related to this video in the slightest, translates from Gaelic into Go My Love. But as I was walking into the bookstore passing the manga section, I saw this. The Wise Beast of the Wizarding Wisdoms, written by the same guy. And despite being just one single volume, it contains a lot of material because this is an anthology. An anthology is a collection of shorter pieces of writing into one large completed work. Sometimes this is poems, in this case it's a collection of problematic furry yaoi. Yeah. The stories in this anthology are linked through the world they share, where a wise wizard named Wisdom created a bunch of furries using magic. And now those furries go to copyright-free Harry Potter to learn magic for themselves and follow in his footsteps. I've decided to break down this video by going through each story individually and then talking about the book as a whole at the end, because there's something I can only speak about after we get a good look at the big picture. So let's dive right into these Wise Beasts with the first story, Alan and Eddington, the Gifted and the Average. Also, sensitivity warning for, roofies and non-con. When I said problematic furry yaoi, I meant it. The protagonist is Eddington, a rabbit who has a secret crush on Alan, one of the most gifted students in his class. He resolves to make a love potion, even temporarily, to get Alan's affection. Eddington kisses Alan, demands that he say he loves him over and over and over before breaking it off once the potion's effect ends. But the next day, when Alan meets up with Eddington, he kisses him of his own volition, explaining that putting the potion into food diluted the effect. After reprimanding Eddington for his weakness, he tells him his love will go unrequited unless he can admit his feelings for real as the story ends. The idea of unrequited love is very common in romance. And Alan and Eddington as characters are also very common. There's nothing particularly unique or standout about them, to be honest. Alan is your standard love interest, strong, confident, better than you, and Eddington is Bill Cosby. Pretty boring. What really carries this chapter is the composition, the way the art is drawn and the pages ordered. Let's look at the scene where Eddington roofies Alan. Rather than body shots, we get a series of close-ups on the characters' faces and even some panels dedicated solely to physical responses. It gives the moment a very intimate feeling, which works to get the audience's attention, especially when they barely know the characters. In fact, I'd go further, saying the closeness makes the scene uncomfortable, selling the idea that what Eddington is doing isn't right. Definitely not sure I like Alan being okay with getting roofied, but at least the story does criticize Eddington's actions. The next story is Florio and Nicole, the Hunter and the Hunted. It centers around the wolf Florio, who has a bad habit of sleeping in class, using his pal Nicole as a pillow. To make matters worse, Florio also has a habit of biting Nicole in his sleep, but the both of them have a secret. No matter how much Nicole complains, he doesn't hate it when Florio bites him. He lets it happen. And Florio only bites him to leave a mark, to show the world that Nicole is his. This story, while not much longer than the first, takes time to develop its characters. We get a pretty good idea of each character's personality, with Florio being the big and slow wolf. Nicole, on the other hand, makes up for his tiny stature with bravado and bravery, more than willing to call Florio out. And yet, the simplicity of their dynamic is undercut by the complexities of their characters. Despite how much of a hard-ass Nicole can be, we're shown that he's willing to relent and let some things slide. And this line here tells us that his complaints may not be entirely accurate to what he feels. And the ending where Florio thinks to himself of the real reason he bites Nicole is important to understanding the story. For Florio's character, it shows that despite being the fur-brained wolf, he's at least keenly aware of what he's feeling. And for the story as a whole, it shows that for all their differences, both Nicole and Florio have trouble saying what they mean. The added dramatic irony forms the crux of the climax, letting the ending work despite the conflict not actually being resolved. The next story is another problematic one, Fermat and Emile, the teacher and the student. And just when you thought roofies were bad enough. The plot concerns two members of the dragon tribe, so y'all scalies get some representation. Granted, it's not the representation you wanted, nor the one you deserved, but it's representation nonetheless. The protagonist of the story is Fermat, a professor at the magical school who has been giving extra lessons to Emile. Today, Emile arrived a bit early, interrupting what Fermat was doing, prompting a spiel on how magic is like math and he's a man of hard numbers and facts. Fermat is an important man with important research, so time is valuable. So, for the life of him, he can't figure out why Emile keeps coming to him, why a simple pat on the head means so much to the child, and why he keeps wasting so much time tutoring him. This is another case of the characters not being fairly unique. Emile isn't much of a character at all, which makes sense because the story focuses heavily on Fermat's perspective. Fermat is ignorant of his own feelings and by extension Emile's, so little attention is placed on the pupil. It's also left ambiguous whether or not Emile is aware of the feelings he has for Fermat, which I suppose leans into the protagonist's perspective. Unlike the last story, which had dramatic irony added at the end, the dramatic irony is prevalent throughout this one. As the audience, we know this is a series of romance and thus can deduce what each character's feelings are for each other. The fact that we know but the characters don't adds dramatic irony to the entire story. That's irony layered over irony, that Fermat, a man who professes himself to hate things that aren't straightforward, is unable to see how obviously he feels for Emile. This final panel is also cute as hell. Real quick, do be sure to like and subscribe, donate to my Ko-fi and Patreon, and check out my live streams on Mondays and Fridays. Also, feel free to leave a recommendation for any furry manga, anime, games, or whatever in the comments. The fourth chapter is Marley and Colette, the cold-blooded and the warm-blooded. In short, Colette is a red deer rooming with Marley, the lizard. Okay, I know that's not very specific, but we're given the character's species at the end of the chapter, and it literally just says lizard. I don't have anything else to work with. Because Marley is a cold-blooded animal, it naturally falls to Colette to help him whenever winter arrives. Marley is quite envious of Colette's warm-bloodedness and at the same time hates that he has to rely on him every time an ice dragon so much as passes over the school. But secretly, Colette loves it. Marley is always so cool and composed, a model student, but there is this one side that no one else sees. One that entirely relies on Colette. Although, he never tells Marley that. This story isn't one of my favorites, despite the good things it has to work with. Colette is a good character. His seeming casual playfulness hides a love-filled twist he can't show Marley. Marley doesn't feel like much of a character to me. He really functions as something for Colette to direct his attention to rather than an actual person. Which does make sense because the idea behind this story is silent yearning. Due to that, rather than contrasting from Marley, Colette contrasts from himself, making him feel deep despite the short time we spend with him. This is a story like a few others in the book, which doesn't get resolved at the end. However, I don't think it's handled here as well as it should have been, leaving the story to feel incomplete. Let's look at the other stories in this anthology, like Florio and Nicole. While it doesn't resolve itself by the end, the setup is paid off upon learning that Nicole's feelings are mutual, or how the next story ends with Fermat just beginning to formulate what he's feeling. The closest we get to that here is Colette thinking that Marley is calling out to him, only to find that the lizard is just talking in his sleep. We don't get any satisfying reward or reveal, so the story just kind of ends in the same place it started, for us and the characters. Seeing Marley cling to Colette for body heat does create some comedy and cute scenes, but that's not enough to carry the story. As for the fifth story, another problematic romance. Kinda. It's complicated. It's titled Doug and Huey, Courtship and Friendship. Huey is a peacock obsessed with getting a girlfriend, but no matter what he does, every girl turns him down. His best friend Doug, the crow, offers his support in Huey's quest while keeping his love for him a secret. But Doug is hiding something much darker and more sinister than Huey realizes. He's the one that's been sabotaging Huey's efforts, lying to everyone that Huey has a secret girlfriend. Despite sabotaging his crush's effort, he's fine with that because the only one that needs to understand Huey is him. Quite the story, isn't it? Unlike the others, which at least had an okay ending where both characters end up in the same place they started, this one is borderline horror. There's a beautiful turn in the tone of the story as it reveals Doug's true nature. The way the panels focus in on Doug's beak rather than his whole face, notably hiding his eyes. Hidden eyes are an easy visual metaphor for hidden intentions. Think Albert Wesker's sunglasses from Resident Evil. It adds to the creepiness of Doug and makes it clear that his dialogue isn't forthright. When the story goes back to showing Doug's face, it doesn't hide his sinister nature, showing a single leering eye. Doug's inner dialogue is the main focus of the latter half, and it's written really well. Rather than being given thought bubbles, it's presented as narration. It also makes heavy use of the pronoun I. The repetition and lack of bubbles emphasizes how deep into his own delusions Doug is. In the ending, the way Doug licks the feather, ugh. He's really channeling his inner Leo Alvarez, and I love him for it. I give it a week before he starts killing people and a month before he kills Huey. By far and away, my favorite chapter. The next story is Alhoff and Carreras, Food and Games. Alhoff and Carreras are both bats with a bad habit of pranking other people. I mean, doing social experiments. Alhoff is forced to skip lunch for breaking a window, but Carreras is here to help with that. They lock lips and... ugh. Listen, some of you may be into gastrointestinal whatever, but I'm not. The two sneak off into a storage room to mess around with an invisibility cloak, but in walks Alan and Eddington, who share a secret kiss. The two are baffled by this. They weren't sharing food, so what were they doing? They attempt it for themselves, and it takes a few tries before they get it right, creating a new game just between the two of them. I don't know if I'm just unable to look past the, feeding, but this story isn't one of my favorites. I definitely see the allure of the story. It manages to capture that feeling of being young and having these feelings that you can't quite describe. That stage in life when you're learning the difference between platonic and romantic. I know the analysis section for this chapter is short, but honestly, I can't look past the vomit stuff. I'm trying to pretend it doesn't exist, and I recommend you do too. The penultimate story is about two teachers, thankfully, Cromwell and Benjamin, the good talker and the good listener. The protagonist of this story is Benjamin, the unicorn nurse at the school. Cromwell is a Griffin professor and can't understand for the life of him why Benjamin lets him rant and rant for hours on end, nor why he actually listens. That's because Benjamin is a closeted homosexual. Unicorns are associated with virgins and purity, so he was always derided when he told anyone he was gay, even banished from his home. Despite Cromwell being a talker, he's also observant and notices the way Benjamin's mood dies when he brings up dating. So, the next day, Cromwell resolves to say nothing and listen to what Benjamin has to say. I'm torn on whether or not Doug and Huey's story is my favorite or this one, and it's for like two wholly different reasons. Doug and Huey is borderline horror, two people in a situation that cannot end well. Benjamin and Cromwell, on the other hand, might as well be Shonen Ai, featuring characters who are aware of their surroundings and go about helping their friends in a good way. But getting back to the story I should be talking about. I love the way it begins as another unrequited love story before the ending opens up with the hint of genuine reciprocation. The fact that this is a story with an undoubtedly healthy dynamic does make it feel fresh when compared to other works in the same anthology. And Benjamin not only being closeted but disowned by his family makes his character more empathetic and adds weight to, well, I was gonna say the metaphor for being gay, but it's not a metaphor, he's just actually gay. And I love that at the core of it is something relatable to the queer experience because I feel like more stories like it should exist. And Cromwell is also a great character. We first get to know him as the hard-ass teacher, but this chapter shows a softer side. And now it's time for the final story. Moshley and Charles, Beast and Man. We're given a bit of world building that all these beast folk live far, far away from the human kingdom, so none of them have actually seen a human before. That is, aside from Moshli. The two of them are fast friends, and every break they always make sure to meet up. However, Charles is envious of not being a beast, being made fun of for being different, having freckles and the like. Moshli counters this by showing him the star-shaped pattern on his fur. He's different too, and that's fine. Besides, he likes that Charles is human. And with that, the two part ways for the time being, determined to meet up again next break. This one is quite the simple story, simply about how there's nothing wrong with what makes us different. Like the one before this, it's a theme closely linked to the queer experience, with freckles or a star-shaped pattern of fur being symbolic of being gay or trans or whatever have you. That being said, I think this final chapter is rather okay. And the plot itself is as flat as the characters, with nothing too unique about it. And with that, we're finally done with all the stories this anthology has to offer. There's a lot to love in this manga, even outside of its themes. One thing I feel is worth mentioning is that the world actually feels believable despite the magic and furry characters. It makes good use of its characters and throwaway lines, letting us get an actual timeline of events. It starts with Florio getting in trouble for sleeping on Nicole. However, before he can lecture Florio after class, Cromwell has to go deal with Alhoff, who got in trouble for breaking a window. Then, Alhoff and Carreras encounter Eddington and Alan necking in the broom closet, and then we see Cromwell complaining to Benjamin about the broken window. Having these characters interact in small ways, bringing up details from other chapters, makes it feel like these characters actually share the world they occupy. I also enjoy how well the story makes use of animal characters actually being animals. It's like Beastars, where which species a character is will actually impact their behavior. Like Florio biting to mark his territory, or Marley being cold-blooded. It's a small thing, but working it into the story improves the world building and the general feel. That aside, let's do what I promised way back when I started this video and get into the major themes of the work. What is the one word you see most frequently in the title? The wise beast of the Wizarding Wisdoms. That's right, wise and its derivatives. And that's not by mistake. Nagabe explicitly wants us, from the point before we even open the book, to know that these beasts are wise. Yet, when we actually start reading, we're met with something that contradicts the very title. Every single character, despite being called wise, is keenly unaware of their own feelings or how to handle them properly. Alan doesn't know how to deal with his own love, so he creates a love potion. And Vermont is unaware of the true nature of his feelings for Emile. But it also goes deeper than just characters being unaware of their own feelings. Like Huey being unaware to his Machiavellian friend's machinations or his complete infatuation with him. Or even how Cromwell brings up Benjamin's painful past without realizing it. It's these profound ignorances that the characters must overcome, and sometimes the chapters hint at it happening and other times they don't. There's also nuance in what we come to expect of the themes as the story goes on. Like Cromwell actually realizing his ignorance and adjusting entirely on his own. In that final story about Moshli and Charles, note how it's the beast that gives advice to the human. Switching the usual idea around and making us ask which of the two is truly wise, the beast or the man. I know I've also mentioned this throughout the video, but the entire manga makes heavy use of dramatic irony. Us, as the audience, know something the characters don't, and our investment in the story comes from seeing if they'll learn what we already know. Thus, tying us back into the title, as the audience wonders if the characters will become as wise as us. And that is where I'm ending this video. It went on way longer than I expected. Without further ado, let's get to our Patreon shoutouts. For our 3 stars, we have special thanks to 87 Werehog, Deku, Zora Chow, Choron, Garen Lafay, Dragon Yara, NonRC, Lightning Shadow, and Kayun. For 4 stars, we have Miki Moon and Miko, the possibilities in the box. And for our Super D-Tuper special 5-star shoutout, we have... First, Vanilla Flower, the elementary school child prodigy. Then Poor Mage, the encrypted arithmetic existence. Followed by Hodari Lion, the ruler of the furry kingdom. Next, Sky King 64, the dirt poor drummer. And finally, Mahagasaur, the heartsick sound nymph. Thank you for watching. Do be sure to like and subscribe. As always, I'm your host Fury, signing out.